Good evening. I'm Andrew Hobbs with Project Censored. Tonight's event is sponsored by Project Censored. Thank you. Tonight's event is sponsored by Project Censored, Students for Media Democracy, Associated Students Productions, and the Media Freedom Foundation. Among the most important Project Censored news events and stories of the past decade, one has to be that of over 1 million dead in Iraq because of United States causes. This, of course, does not include the number of deaths from the first Gulf War nor the ensuing sanctions placed upon the country during the former regime. Excuse me. These deaths were in excess of the normal civilian deaths under the Hussein government. Among U.S. Leaders and policy elites, the issue of counting the dead was dismissed before the invasion ever began. In an interview with reporters in March 2002, U.S. General Tommy Franks stated, "You know we don't do body counts." Fortunately, there are many who are concerned about the humanitarian costs of war and empire, and Cindy Sheehan is one of those people. Cindy's world changed forever on April 4th, 2004, when her eldest child, Casey Austin, was killed in the line of duty in Iraq. He was 24 years old. Casey, who was a specialist for the 1st Cavalry Unit in Sadr City, was awarded a Purple Heart and a Bronze Star posthumously for his valorous combat. In response to this tragedy, Cindy founded the Gold Star Families for Peace in January 2005. This organization, which is comprised of family members who have had relatives die as a result of the war, is dedicated to ending the war and bringing the combat troops back home. In August 2005, Cindy traveled to Crawford, Texas, with the goal of confronting President Bush to demand an end of the occupation of Iraq. Other peace activists joined Cindy's effort, and the demonstrations that came to be known as Camp Casey began. Camp Casey was a regular gathering whenever Bush was in Crawford, and it drew thousands of activists and peace protesters from around the world to help us bring about an end to the occupation of Iraq. Known worldwide for her determined efforts to promote peace, Cindy Sheehan has been dubbed the Rosa Parks of the anti-war movement and Peace Mom by the mainstream press. Specifically, she has been featured in the San Francisco Chronicle, the San Francisco Examiner, the San Francisco Bay Guardian, the New York Times, the Washington Post, Newsweek, Time, The Nation, Rolling Stone, The Advocate, Vanity Fair, along with scores of alternative media publications. I'm pleased to welcome Cindy Sheehan.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Peter Phillips and Project Censored and everybody else who sponsored this talk tonight. Just one thing I want to clear up before I go on to my talk. Hi, so nice to see you. It's a grandmother for peace up front. I'm a grandmother for peace now. My grandson's going to be a year old tomorrow. Yay. Let's hear it for the grandbabies and peace. And so anyway, Andrew said that my son was killed in the line of duty. And I'm just going to go like this. Seems like most of you are fanning out over this way. But because the podium's here, so you all sat over there, right? Anyway, it depends on what you think the line of duty is. Okay, we have to have a discussion about that. Casey signed up in May of 2000 to basically get college benefits. Now, he did not want to be a combat troop, and they do make certain distinctions about that. He wanted to be a chaplain's assistant. And so he was promised he would be a chaplain's assistant. And his recruiter told him, "Sheehan, even if there's a war, you won't see combat because you will just be in country in a support role." Well, Casey got to boot camp, and that, what they call in the military MOS, the job was not available that he signed up for and that his recruiter said he could do. So they said, you have two choices. You can be a cook or a Humvee mechanic. Well, first of all, Casey was a horrible cook. Secondly, he didn't even know how to change the oil in his old beater. So he was given what they call a Hobson's choice, right? Between two bad choices. So he chose to be a Humvee mechanic. And from all reports of credible people, he was a terrible mechanic. And I said, I could have told you that. But so before he went to Iraq, he came home for Christmas in 2003, and he told everybody who would listen to him that he would not be able to kill an innocent person. He wouldn't be able to kill. That just wasn't Casey. Killing was not Casey. And he said that he wouldn't have to anyway because he's a Humvee mechanic. Mom, I'm just going to be in the motor pool. I'm just going to fix the Humvees. And he was in Iraq for 5 days when his sergeant dragged him into the mission that killed him. He was killed in combat. Now, if he was killed by a bomb that fell on the base when he was working on the Humvee, maybe that would have been line of duty, because that was his duty, not being dragged into a battle. And when you have a loved one killed in war, they always want to make it seem like it was a heroic death, that you need to, that some of Casey's, superiors came over to his funeral and said what a great mechanic he was. He could fix anything. I was like, really? Are we talking about Casey Sheehan? And what a great guy he was. And yes, he was a great guy. But when his superiors told me he was such a great mechanic, that started making me doubt their story. And come to find out from people who actually worked with Casey, no, he wasn't a good mechanic. Great guy, but not a good mechanic. So, but then we also were told over and over and over again, your son volunteered for the mission. He volunteered for the mission. He took the place of a private. Casey was a specialist, and he ordered the private out of the truck and jumped in and was killed. But that's not the true story. The true story that makes Casey a hero to me is he was ordered by his sergeant to go on the mission, and Casey said, no, I'm a mechanic. I'm not going. And to me, that was a brave and heroic thing, because Casey knew that the mission was corrupt, that the mission sucked, and he didn't want to participate in it. So to me, that's what makes him a hero, not this false military cover-up or snow jobs that they tell all of the families. So anyway, I just wanted to talk about that and clear that up. And Andrew, you probably just read what someone wrote for you. And then people always say, Cindy's son, Cindy, her son Casey was lost in Iraq. And that's just another euphemism. Or he's a fallen hero. No, he's not lost. If he was lost, I could find him. And I know exactly where he is. He's in his grave in Vacaville, California. If he was fallen, I could pick him up. So no, he was murdered. He was not murdered by the insurgent that pulled the trigger. He was murdered by the foreign policy of his government. He was murdered by George Bush. George Bush might as well have been over there shooting our soldiers. So I know people think maybe euphemisms will make me feel more comfortable. But there's no way you can gloss over what our country is doing to people. There's no way you can hide. You know, even if those torture photos don't get released. We've seen photos from Abu Ghraib. We've seen photos. We know. You don't even have to tell us because we know that war produces atrocity. So we don't have to be told, we don't have to be shown pictures to know these things. But you can't gloss over and you can't hide these facts, and you have to talk about them in real language and not in euphemisms. So my talk today was titled, How Can We Help President Obama Get Out of Iraq? And that's something that I've been thinking about even before there was a President Obama. So, of course, we tried our hardest to do it when George Bush was president and Dick Cheney, and when the Republicans controlled Congress. We tried super hard. On September 23rd, 2005, there was at least 600,000 people marching in Washington, D.C. And to me, that's significant. And we were energized, we were motivated, we got arrested, we've walked the halls of Congress, we've done vigils, we've signed petitions, we've done whatever we can to tell our leaders how we feel. I even ran for office myself because people just weren't listening, and they're still not listening. So in 2006, in November of 2006, in the midterm elections, Congress changed, the face of Congress changed. It was no longer dominated by Republicans, it was dominated by Democrats. And I worked with those Democrats before they came into power. And you know what they would tell me? Cindy, just get us elected. Get us the majority, then we can do something about the war. Then we can do something about George Bush and Dick Cheney. So I believed them. I trusted them. And they used the energy of the anti-war movement to come into power, and the first thing they did was betray that energy, betray our movement. And the sad thing is that many organizations in the national peace movement or anti-war movement allow themselves to be co-opted by the Democratic Party. So they think that's their job to get Democrats elected. And so even before Nancy Pelosi was elected, she was saying impeachment off the table. You know, but she did say one other thing. She kept that promise, impeachment off the table, but she also said, no more blank checks for war. If you put the Democrats in power, we will not write George Bush another blank check for war. But what she really meant was, we'll give George Bush every blank check for war he asks for. And that's when I started to have my epiphany. Admittedly, I had it later in life, and it took a tragedy to bring this epiphany on. But essentially, the two-party system in this country is a fraud. It's a myth. It's a myth to think that in the higher elevations of government, that there's a difference between Democrat and Republican, that we, the people, actually have influence on them. I'll tell you who has influence on them: the lobbyists, the Wall Street. What did Senator Durbin say last week? The bankers own us. And when he said us, he meant Congress. Those are the people that have the influence on our elected officials. So what can we do as grassroots movements to change that. Fire them? Did I hear that? I tried to do that. They own the elections. They own the system that puts them and keeps them in power. You know what would be awesome? It would be awesome if we had ranked voting. It would be awesome if we had publicly funded campaigns where everybody got the same amount of money from the public, level the playing fields. It would be awesome if we had some kind of fairness doctrine. It had some kind of fairness doctrine that people could have equal media time when they run for office. But they'll never do that. They'll never change because that's what keeps them in power. That's what keeps them killing us. That's what keeps them oppressing us. And when we go and vote for that system, we legitimize that system. So what can we do? Honestly, what can we do? We have to work, instead of working separately, we have to work together. Instead of having several different candidates with pro-peace platforms running, we need one. Instead of having a Ralph Nader and Cynthia McKinney and Dennis Kucinich and, all these different splitting the progressive movement, we need one. But the main thing that we need to do is wake up to the myth and the fraud of the two-party system. And had a big discussion on Flashpoints earlier about that, is that it's not the person. You can like Obama. You can think Obama's a great guy, and you can think Obama has the best intentions in the world, that he does want the troops to come home, that he does want torture to end, that he does want to release, that he wants to be transparent. But it's not about Obama, and unfortunately, Obama has made it about Obama. It's about the system. You know why he didn't release the torture photos? Because his generals told him not to. Now, he's the president of the United States. He doesn't have to listen to the generals. He's the freaking commander-in-chief. He can say, well, I've heard you, generals, but I'm going to do it anyway because I think it's right. He could go in and sign executive order after executive order, bringing the troops home, closing military bases, ending torture, ending military commissions acts. He could do that. He could actually do that, but he's not going to do it because the president is actually not the person in control of the empire. There's, like we pointed out before, there's something called a military-industrial Wall Street bankster complex that's in charge. So I'm really stumped. This is a great topic because it's really something that I have been thinking about and studying and obsessing about for years. Totally obsessed with it. We'll take questions pretty soon. That how can we, the people, affect what happens in the government? What happens on Wall Street? What happens in the media? How can we have an effect? We can't have an effect unless we have a mass movement. And we just have seen that those are really hard to sustain. They can flash like they did in the summer of '05, but it's hard to sustain because there's no foundation for a mass movement. And the only way we can build them is slowly, foundationally building on those foundations. Not situationally, because those always will dissipate if they're not founded on something that's solid. So I was lying in bed one night. I've been struggling mightily with this issue, with the politics issue, just going through a year-long campaign against the Speaker of the House in San Francisco, which the aftermath is actually worse than the campaign. The aftermath has been pretty awful. But, you know, then you're trying to think, what's the relevance of the peace movement in a post-Bush current Obama situation, where many people still think that Obama was a peace candidate, when many people still think that he's a peace president. No matter what he does, they still have this image because he gave one anti-war speech in 2002. So they have this image, and it was against the Iraq war. He said in that speech, I'm not against war, I'm against dumb wars. And his movement didn't rise up to just really tell him that all wars are dumb. And we're against it, and we're going to hold you accountable. So Obama's, a few days after his inauguration, he continued the cross-border bombing of Pakistan. He fulfilled his campaign promises to send more troops to Afghanistan, lengthen the time of withdrawal from Iraq. When people don't even realize he's just following the standard of forces agreement that was agreed to between George Bush, the Bush administration, and the puppet Bush administration in Baghdad. And so I'm struggling with all this because I can see the attraction of being bamboozled by hope, which I call the four-letter H word. People say it to me. I say, I'm going to wash your mouth out. To be bamboozled by style. Because not only did we have a president previous to Obama that was totally, ruled by the military-industrial complex and the shadow government, but he was stupid and arrogant about it, right? He couldn't put together two sentences or two words. I was giving him too much credit without sounding like a jackass. So I can see the attraction of saying, wow, now we have someone who he might not be able to speak extemporaneously, but he sure knows how to read a speech well. He knows how to read what people write for him really well. And he has a stylistic difference from George Bush. I will give him that, and I've met him several times. I don't have anything personally against him. And I hope that I don't make anybody mad talking, like this realistically. But how can we as a movement expect our leaders to have integrity when we don't have integrity? When we can say, oh, Iraq and Afghanistan and torture and photos and Military Commissions Act and bankster bailouts and FISA violations, those were really, really bad when Bush was doing them. But if Obama's doing them, he must have a good reason. So if we don't have the integrity to hold our officials, no matter what party they are, to the same standard, because politicians, I'm going to tell you guys a secret that you might not know, they don't have any integrity. So and that's what's good about being an activist. We're the ones that need to have that integrity. We're the ones that need to have that honesty, and we're the ones that can be the ones that don't allow ourselves to be co-opted, that don't allow ourselves to be bought, that don't sway with public opinion. And what's really amazing to me is Obama sways with negative public opinion. If the Republicans start attacking him on something, he changes his tune. But when he was running for president, millions of his supporters said, do not vote for the FISA Modernization Act. There was actually a movement on his website, but what did he do? He voted for the FISA Modernization Act. So he can't, it doesn't appear that he can be swayed positively, but he can be swayed when he has negative pressure put on him. And with dastardly Dick Cheney and his traveling lascivious grin, smirk, go all over the news, talking about, hell yeah, I'm paraphrasing. Hell yeah, I authorized torture. Hell yeah, we knew about it. Yeah, and it kept us safe. Look, since September 11th, we haven't been attacked. So torture is a good thing. And if Obama doesn't want to torture people, then he's compromising the safety of Americans. And so what does Obama do? He moves closer to the right. Instead of standing up for the principled stance that torture is wrong. Even if it keeps Americans safe, it's wrong. We pay a heavy price for that safety. Spiritually, around the world, our standing in the world, we paid an awful price for that. So Obama doesn't do that and tells Dick Cheney, well, you know, one good way to shut you up, I'm gonna arrest you. You're going to put you on trial and throw you in prison and see how much you want to talk then. You know, that would be the principled position to take. Not, oh, yeah, well, I'm moving over to the right because Bill O'Reilly's making fun of me. And so I tend to get off the track. So anyway, I was lying in bed one night, struggling with these issues. How do you find relevancy in a post-Bush country? Many of my friends, just like Cindy, you know, we're not bamboozled by the system. We know that the elections are bought and paid for by the ruling class. We know that Obama's not going to bring any effective change, but you know what? We're tired. You know, we're tired of hating. We're tired of all the work we did for nothing. And that's the problem, is because all the anger and hatred was focused on the wrong thing. It was focused on a person and not the system. And I'm as guilty of that as anybody. You know, I would love to see George Bush and Dick Cheney chained to a wall somewhere together for eternity. I tried to clean it up. I did a pretty good job. That's not really what I was thinking. However, I realize that that's a way to put a dent in the system, is by holding an American leader accountable. What if we had done that during Vietnam? What if we had done that during Korea, or when Truman dropped 2 atomic bombs in Japan? What if we had said, yeah, we might have won the war, but that was a war crime. That was a criminal act. But no, we don't. We lionize these people, especially if they die. All of a sudden, every president's a scoundrel, but when they die, they go in this pantheon of gods of presidents, and they never did anything wrong. And, you know, Ford goes from a bumbling, stumbling, you know, nothing, to the person that healed and saved America because he pardoned Nixon. Well, that's just plain, how old are you? Bullshit. You tomorrow? That's my grandson's birthday tomorrow. That's just, you know, if this nation was healed by Ford pardoning Nixon, we wouldn't have had Iraq and George Bush and Dick Cheney. The beat goes on and on and on. So I got off the track again. So one night, I was laying in bed, struggling with these issues. I know you guys have heard this one before. And I came up with, something popped into my head. It was myth, M-Y-T-H, Myth America. The 10 greatest myths of the robber class and the case for revolution. It just came in my head. I'm like, wow, that's a great title. I'm going to get out of bed and write a book. And I got out of bed and I sketched out what I felt were the 10 greatest myths, even though, of course, it's not limited to 10 myths. But I feel like if you're going to complain about something, that you should also offer solutions. And during my campaign and my run against Nancy Pelosi, we ran into roadblock after roadblock after roadblock after roadblock. They don't want a person, a regular person in Congress. They don't want somebody that's from the people. So they try to do everything they can to keep you out, and they're usually successful. And so after all these roadblocks, I started to realize that there's not all these different divisions in this country that we are told that there is. You know, that in the upper classes, there's none. If there's no such thing as a Democrat or a Republican in the upper classes. There's no such thing as a Jew or a Christian or a Muslim in the upper classes. There's no such thing as race or anything. And I thought there's just really one division in this country. There's just one line. There's the robber class, and then there's us, the robbed class. And this is where the robber class has imposed all these divisions on us. You know, you're a Democrat, you're a Republican. You're white, you're black, you're brown. You're Christian, Jew, Muslim. You're male, female. And those are things that can all be changed. I've changed several of them in my life. Michael Jackson showed us you can change your color. You can change your gender. Some things aren't easy to change, but everything can be changed. And so they keep us in the robbed class. The reason they can rob us is because they keep us divided. They keep us fighting each other. And so we're fighting each other, and they can steal everything from us. They can steal our money, they can steal our jobs, they can steal our labor, they can steal our children, and to kill them in robber class wars. Because we're so busy on our class fighting over real things. You know, we do discuss real things, but we're not encouraged to come to the conclusion that we have more in common than we do that separate us. And so what can we do in the robbed class to stop the robber class wars? I'm not even going to focus on Obama. I'm going to focus on the robber class wars. And they're all robber class wars. They profit, we pay, 100% of the time. The robber class profits, the robbed class pays for these wars. We pay with our money, we pay with our taxes, we pay with our safety, we pay with our economic security, and we have even been told that it's noble. It's noble to die in the robber class wars. That's one of the biggest myths of the robber class. And you notice very, very few times do their children or their selves fight in their wars that they profit off of. So the solution in the robbed class is it's very simple. I'm gonna keep you guys in suspense while I drink some water. It's really easy. Don't go in the military. Don't allow your children to go in the military. It's not noble. It's not an honorable profession. It's to be used by the robber class and abused and exploited. And has anybody been in the military? I see a veteran for peace. I see a few people. You become property, lock, stock, and barrel of the robber class. And they can do whatever they want with you when you join the military. But we have a situation in this country where our children can't find work. They can't afford college. They have very little options. They can't get health care, right? Some people join the army just to get their teeth fixed. What kind of society is this? Is this when only health care, education, good food, housing is rights to the robber class? To the robbed class, those things are privileges. Healthcare is a privilege. Education is a privilege. Housing is a privilege. No, that's another robber class myth. They're not privileges, they're human rights. But we've been told all along, oh, we don't have money for single-payer health care. We don't have money to make education free or affordable. We don't have money for universal housing in this country. We don't have money for good nutrition programs to make sure everybody in this country has good food, healthy water. But if AIG needs money, they have money. If the Pentagon needs money, they have money. Where's that money come from? So what I am saying and what I'm arguing from somebody who has not been in the movement for very long, but from somebody who has been doing everything in the movement, that has done everything, that has done it with a full-time intensity, is that we have very little influence on the robber class. But what we do have influence on is each other and ourselves, and to remove ourselves from their systems. I like Peter's bumper sticker says, Robin Hood was right. I assume that means to rob from the rich to give to the poor. Well, they're robbing from the poor to give to the rich, and they're making us poorer and poorer and poorer. So the only way we're going to have this reverse effect, a Robin Hood effect, is by not participating in their systems. And then we'll have a more equitable distribution of wealth and of resources. And it's not just to make Americans safe, secure, prosperous, healthy. Whatever happens in America has a tremendous effect in the rest of the world. And there's robber class and robbed class all over the world. So this has been one long commercial for my book. My book is only available by PDF. I wanted to do it that way so I can get it to people as fast as possible. So $10 donation to Cindy Sheehan's Soapbox. But it's about creating the communities and the foundation that we need to build a mass movement for change. And we, as speaking out of experience, we cannot create this mass movement without it being grassroots, and without it being community-based, and without it being foundational. But we don't have the generations it takes. How long did it take to end slavery or give women the right to vote or, civil rights and union rights? It took generations. We don't have that. With the environmental degradation, economic degradation, with the wars, we don't have decades, let alone generations. So I don't have all the answers. You don't have all the answers. Nobody has all the answers. But together in community, we have the answers. We have more of the answers. But more importantly, together in community, we have more questions. And that's the only way that we're going to end these robber class wars for profit, in my opinion. So thank you so much for being here. I think we're going to take questions now. So if there's a question or a statement, there's a microphone right up here.
Hello, Cindy Sheehan. I'm John Jankel from Grayton, and I have a solution. The solution, Cindy, is for one member of Congress, the only people who can help us, to stand on the floor of Congress and say, cease fire in unconstitutional wars of congressional choice, never necessity. That's a possible solution. The problem is getting a member of Congress to stand up.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And that's where this meeting tonight could be the instigator, because this school has a representative on the Cotati City Council, and any local legislator can move to petition the United States to cease fire in undeclared wars. And that petition could come from any city council, any local legislator in any city council, and it could be advocated by this school's representative to the Cotati City Council.
Is that measure binding on Congress or binding on the Commander-in-Chief?
Thank you for talking about the Commander-in-Chief. We have not had a Commander-in-Chief since Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
You're right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The
Technically, he's right.
Constitution is quite clear. Only Congress has the power to declare war, and the President is called into actual service by a declaration of war, which sets out specific foreign policy to issue a warrant to declare war on foreign soil, to search and seize upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation, so we're not depriving persons of life, liberty, and property without due process, which is what we are doing. Not only our Earth neighbors, but our loved ones.
Okay, so let me reframe my question. Would such a resolution, City Council, have authority over the President, who's actually the one that can order the withdrawal of the troops?
Okay, unfortunately, Congress authorized the President of the United States in October 16th of 2002 to use the armed forces of the United States as he determines to be necessary. The worst organized crime in the history of man, dear lady. No question about it.
You don't have to convince me.
It is the epitome of fascism and tyranny. And it is the foundation of fascist United States, and funding those unconstitutional actions has triggered an economic crisis.
Well, we have someone coming up, but I'll answer to that. Is that something that the movement is well aware of? The movement is well aware that Congress abrogated its constitutional duty to declare war to George Bush. And that is something that we organized around for a long time. And what you weren't here when I was telling you that the Democrats in Congress kept telling me, Cindy, just get us elected, just get us elected, just get us elected. And after 2006, when they had a bare majority, you know what they said then? Get more of us elected, and then we'll do something. So we have a Democratic House, a Democratic Senate, a Democratic president, and we're not moving anywhere near in the right direction. So, I mean, you can go and talk to Congress until you're blue in the face, and you can beat your head on the marble walls of Congress, and unless you come in with tens of thousands of dollars, you're not going to set their policy. And we need to move on to the next question.
I have another way, though.
Can we move on to the next question?
One more thing. Any member of a local legislator is under oath of office to support and defend the Constitution.
So is Congress.
And that's correct.
That's correct. I don't care.
That's correct. In California, we have California Penal Code Section 37, and if they give aid and comfort to domestic enemies, they're ripe for a death sentence. That's how we do it.
Well, I know all your facts are correct, but getting one of our elected officials to you know, there are a few of them that have been talking about this stuff. Dennis Kucinich, Lynn Woolsey, Barbara Lee. Barbara Lee is the only one that voted no on the Afghanistan war resolution. They know all this stuff. They know it better than you know it. But to get them to act, I'm not going to say impossible because nothing's impossible, but it's highly improbable.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
I'm Colleen Fernald.
Hey, Colleen, talked to you on the phone, huh?
Yeah, we spoke on KSRO earlier today, and what I was mentioning then is when Cindy Sheehan decided not to challenge Feinstein in the 2006 race, I am a mother with sons of draftable age, and I saw that administration campaigning to go and invade Iran, and I said, there's not enough troops here. You know, if they try to start another one, they're going to draft. I want to be preemptive on a draft. And so what I say that we need to do is to tell all candidates what it takes to get your vote and make sure they deliver. And if they're not going to deliver, then challenge them. And I suggest right now we start telling the candidates for governor, I want the California National Guard back right now. We could have a disaster right now.
And we have, and it's been the fires and the floods. It's been pretty hard on our state not having our National Guard and their equipment here.
So in addition to all the state government, in addition to the federal government, and campaigning and continuing till it's done and telling them what it takes, and the one thing that we appreciate what Lynn Woolsey has done, and we appreciate her out of Iraq caucus, but she hasn't asked for a ceasefire. So if all of you say, what we've learned today, and I confirmed this when I tried to get a resolution through in the California Democratic Party, you know, I'm trying to clean them up from the inside. Last year we got a resolution that they were saying to end the Public Law 107243, the law that's keeping us there. No more appropriations except for safe and orderly withdrawal. And the last thing was a call for an international ceasefire, a conference for that. So the Rules Committee said, no, our people we give our endorsement to don't have to even read our platforms. So you're right, it's kind of meaninless. But when you
I don't think it's meaningless. I think it has a lot of meaning. I think it's useless.
But
it has a lot of meaning, very meaningful what you're doing, and very meaningful what the gentleman said.
I want to answer the question, though, that came up about is it meaningful for a city or a board of supervisors to pass a resolution stating their case in something of this magnitude? Because right now they're all getting their budgets cut. It is very relevant. And Lynn Woolsey just voted against that funding to go for more appropriations.
Right.
But if she had a resolution from each one of these cities, like we have for climate protection, all the other good reasons that we know that we need funding for, habitat protection, healthcare, everything else that we need protections for. If we said ceasefire, let's just have military for defense. We can cut our carbon emissions because the U.S. military is responsible for 50% of our carbon footprint. We could achieve all those goals, and we have enough money if it's appropriated. But ceasefire is the way to go, because everyone hurting us for reasons in their jihadist religion would have to ceasefire as well. So we need a declaration for that. We need the left to ask for that.
I think that's the crux of the problem.
But when Lynn Woolsey can go before the House and say, not only my constituents, but my cities and my counties and my state. And she has called for this, and only Sebastopol's responded. So I encourage you all to go to your city council meetings, go to the board of supervisors, and continue to chime into this until it's done. Thank you very much.
And the one thing that is difficult about all that is that the left makes very little demands on our elected officials. We might make demands on them, but we don't make any consequences. You know, San Francisco voted 2/3 in 2006 for an impeachment resolution. San Francisco has voted over and over again for the things that you're talking about as resolutions. Nancy Pelosi still won't impeach George Bush, and she still lets the funding to go through. But what happens? She doesn't represent San Francisco. She's not a progressive. So a true progressive with a a true progressive platform, that everybody knows my my integrity and my platform, runs against her, and I basically got my ass kicked. So it's okay to demand our elected officials to do it, but if they don't, we don't offer them any consequences for not doing it. They know. They know. I call it the tyranny of incumbency, or smarter people than me call it congressional stagnation. They know that they practically have to murder somebody on C-SPAN before they're not reelected.
Well, I got a call from my brother this morning, and he said he just lost, or he's about to lose his house because a year ago when he started to go into financing, he had to have, so many things like a credit score this high and, all his ducks in a row. So he's been busy all year getting all his ducks in a row, and he goes to the bank to get, and they've made it impossible to give him the money. So he's gonna be losing all that. Well, he's the last person in my family that owns a house that hasn't lost their house. And I'm just so darn frustrated. Everybody in Congress voted to give those banks all that money. I mean, today I've been what's the solution? Just so frustrated. I mean, I know Barbara Boxer walks around in the grocery store, And Obama, the first thing he called for was everybody that I haven't read it myself, but I heard that he, asked everybody in his cabinet, do you own a gun? Have you ever owned a gun? Does anybody in your family own a gun? Have you ever known anybody that's owned a gun? And the first thing, you start to see is this anti-gun legislation. Well, I read a history book that wasn't a popular history book. I just found this really old book about Nazi Germany, and before they went in and took away all the guns of all the Jews, before they marched them off to concentration camps and everybody went along, and you don't hear one single story of resistance because they didn't have any guns, And I'm sorry, I've been in this peace movement since 2000. My first protest, I worked on Al Gore's campaign. I was scared to death that George Bush was going to become a president, somebody like that who had killed more people in the history of this country as far as a governor, putting people to death. I thought that is just deplorable. How could we have somebody like that in a leadership position? And, the more research I did, the more I came to the same conclusions that you're coming to. It's that it's good cop, bad cop in Washington, D.C. There is no difference between Republicans and Democrats, and they don't play by the rules, but we have to play by the rules.
Not at that level. There's no difference, for sure.
And then there's the Equal Rights Amendment, and I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent, but that thing was voted on in 1980, and it never got ratified. It just kind of got swept under the carpet. So when you were talking about at the upper levels, there's no difference in race, there's no difference, in the only difference is money, Isn't sex still
gender?
Yeah, gender.
You can change your gender.
But yeah, in the upper echelons, I mean, there's never been a woman president, and I'm not trying to suggest anything about Hillary.
Well, and I want to give you my theory about that. This country the Constitution was written by, it was formed only by and for white male property owners. So I have a little acronym, and I call them WAMPOs. Okay, so there's white, and I don't want to offend any white male property owners here, because there's many white male property owners in the robbed class, right? But this country is still for the WAMPOs. However, they let a few females, token people of color, token, what's that called? Your sexual preference. There's some token LGBTQ people. And it's to give us the appearance that we have representation. Now, Hillary, I would love to see a woman president. I would love to see a woman president, but look at the women in history, most recent history, that have had power. They've been Condoleezza Rice. They've been Golda Meir. They've been Margaret Thatcher, Benazir Bhutto. They're all pretty much wampos in dresses or with boobs. And so just because you're a woman, a female, doesn't make you a woman. So and then Dennis Kucinich is a perfect example of somebody who's a white male property owner, but he has different values than the rest of the people in the system. So that's what we have to struggle with, that we only have the appearance of choice when we're voting for president, right? It's just the appearance of choice. And we have the appearance of having some kind of effect. And one of my theories is that if you look back since Roosevelt, it's been Democrat, Roosevelt, Truman, then it was Eisenhower, then it was Kennedy, Johnson, then it was Nixon, Ford, then it was Carter, then it was Reagan. And the only time there's been back-to-back the same political party was Reagan-Bush. And then Bush only got one term, and then there was Clinton, Bush, Obama. It's Republican, Democrat, Republican, Democrat, Republican, Democrat. Why is that? Well, this is my theory. Since I'm the queen of I'm the queen of thinking that politicians always have a negative interest at heart, is that it's because for 4 to 8 years, you got at least half of the country on board with you. And you got the rest of the country criticizing you. And then so they switch, and that switches. So it's to keep at least half of us co-opted by the system and bought into the system. But what the system did wrong was, like I said, put an arrogant, stupid person in charge of it. So George Bush left with a 23% approval rating. And they thought, we need somebody kinder and gentler, more attractive, more articulate to legitimize the empire again. So we just have to focus on the system and not the people, and changing the system. And we can only change the system by working together and changing ourselves. And that's the only way that, in my opinion, that's going to happen.
Well, I have a friend who was a lobbyist in Washington, D.C. for the Peace Movement Act in the 1960s. And I kind of, developed this idea, and he already had developed this idea about direct democracy, and I didn't think that that was really doable, and how could that actually work. But apparently, the 9th, 10th, and 11th Amendments to the Constitution give the people actually are just as powerful as any other branch of the government.
Well, we're supposed to be the sovereigns.
So that we could take every law that they vote into, like the Patriot Act, they didn't even bother to read before they voted on it.
In Mexico,
if we just vote on everything ourselves and not let anybody vote on anything, it seems to me that with like Facebook or the internet or something,
you have to get people to care.
Mm-hmm.
You have to get people to care first, and that's what building these grassroots communities are designed to do. In Mexico, there was a contested election, and millions of Mexicans shut down Mexico City for 3 months. And they call it the legitimate government. They don't think that Calderon is their president. They think Obrador is their president. And what happened when we had contested elections? We probably watched American Idol. Can you imagine a situation where millions of Americans would shut down Washington, D.C. and take it over for 3 months? I think that would be an amazing amazing thing to do, but we have to, first of all, all of us reject the myths and educate ourselves. So, does anybody else have a question? Okay.
I'm a survivor of the 60s, and we had to deal, I want to go to your comments about the problems with dealing with the left, because the feminist movement, the women's movement, really did deal with the left. And the way we did it, in terms of really bringing grassroots activity, is exactly what you're talking about, is building grassroots and community support. And focusing on things like, right now, things that we can all do, like discouraging young men and women from enlisting and going into the military. Or even, I think one of the messages that has been abundantly clear to us in the past 6 or 8 months is that this government and this economy needs only one thing from us, and that is that we purchase. It should be a real wake-up message to all of us to just, to not put into an economy that's that's perpetuating war, sending troops to Afghanistan. So I just wanted to support your call for the grassroots, because we really did it successfully in the 60s and 70s in response to the progressive malaise that had taken over the country. And we really got something happening. And I think it's, well, you're a good example of why it works.
Well, thank you. I forget what I was going to say about that, but I want to talk a little bit about the economy. Like you were talking about, they only need from us purchasing on credit. And we're not called citizens anymore, we're called consumers. And, like with your family members up there losing their homes, losing their jobs, while the banks and Wall Street are getting bailed out. And an economic recovery to the robber class is when Wall Street's doing better. But when Wall Street's doing better, I don't see Main Street doing better. I see people keep losing their jobs. And the economic reforms we can do, I wrote the 10 myths of the robber class. One of the myths is the Federal Reserve cares about you. What the Federal Reserve is designed to do is to create money created on debt. And it's to keep us in a constant state of debt. And so what we can do in the robbed class is to, first of all, refuse to use credit and to refuse to shop in multinational corporations, to patronize your local businesses, to grow as much of your own food as you can, to use a least amount of energy as you can. And what you said, what we can do is doable. Everything that I put in my book, I'm already doing. And if it's relevant to me, or if it's relevant to you, it's because people told me when I started my radio show, they said, Cindy, you did a big thing, you did a wonderful thing, and you had a huge effect, but what can I do? Please tell me something every week that I can do. And so that's why I wrote the Myth America. And the solutions are all within our own grasp, within our own reach, that each and every person can do this. But it's like being an alcoholic. First, you have to recognize there's a problem. And then you can start to solve the problem. And another thing about the grassroots organizers in the 60s and 70s, I've had people, I was in elementary school, but I've had people say they had phone trees. And they could get hundreds of people out somewhere within hours. We have the freaking internet. We can reach millions of people. Why? What's the difference between then and now? Is something that I always ask myself. Is it decades of the media? You know, the corporate media control? Is it decades of neoconservative policies like doing away with the draft and making college very expensive? Is it people are just fighting to survive? People are working many jobs just to pay their bills and stay in their homes. So that's the thing that we know that Americans have to be personally affected most of the time. And that's one thing that's happening now is globalism that has harmed the rest of the world is starting to seriously harm the economy of America.
Just one thing to add to that in terms of what has happened. The thing that really worked for us in the 1960s was consciousness raising. And I mean, that's what you're doing by speaking, but that's what we need to get more back to. And that really took place with groups, small groups of people getting together in each other's homes and community centers and really talking through the issues in terms of their own personal experience of it until you get that, aha, now I understand why they're robbers. You know, and when you get that aha, that consciousness, the motivation follows from that.
And we have another problem after decades. I remember the 60s is we had neighbors in neighborhoods. And I couldn't go outside to play without every single mom being my mom. And Cindy Miller, you get, out of there. You stop that, smack me on the back of the head. If we can't even talk to other people's children today, let alone give them a swat on the butt like my neighbors did. I should have called them and reported them, but the police would have come out and probably give me a smack in the head too. So, but we had neighborhoods. We knew each other. And we've lost that concept now. Everybody is spread far and wide. The parents work, the kids are involved in, or we're just go home and lock ourselves in our home and watch TV. So it's been a very, my concept, I call it a revolution because it's revolutionary. It's a total revolutionary concept without, unfortunately, like you said, we don't have the firepower to fight the robber class in the streets. And besides, innocent people get killed, and violence is never good. But we have the power right here to change things, to make this revolution. I think you've already had a question. There's a man back there that has a question. I'm sorry, I can't hear you. There's like a fan above me. You're going to have to use the microphone.
That's what this is for.
Yeah.
Yes, hi, Cindy. Thank you.
Hi, thank you.
Could you speak to the impact of population or the excess population in terms of the environment and the political impact and how that might fit into the book I haven't read yet, but I will when I download it? Thank you.
Well, of course, there's limited space and resources on our planet. And many people speculate that war and disease and famine and environmental disasters are certainly population control. And I don't write too much about I don't even think I write about this in Myth America, but that's certainly, and it's not just because less people are having less children, but we're living longer. So longevity contributes to the amount of people that are here on the planet. So it's not only just about a quantity of life, but it's also about a quality of life. And the wars that we've had, at least in the last decades, have been for resources. And so people like that bumper sticker says, what are all those Iraqis doing living on our oil? You know, so yeah, there's definitely has an impact on politics. We see the China, that China is rising in political clout and economic clout with their big population. And I want to recommend an article to everybody here. It's called Pipelineistan, and it's about the pipelines in Asia and the effect of Russia and China on the resources of oil and natural gas. It's very interesting, and it talks about it more intelligently than I can talk about it. But it's written by Pepe Escobar, and it's called Pipelineistan. So please read that, and you'll get this feel of this strategy that's going on in geopolitics.
Cindy, I'd like to take this just a little bit different level. As citizens of the United States, we haven't been used to the idea that we can't go to our government to get redress of grievances. And I bring that up because you as individuals also cannot go to the United Nations and say, my nation is screwing me, what do I do? Because as far as the United Nations is concerned, we as individuals are second-class citizens. So my point is that we may have to start thinking at the level of a bigger stage and asking ourselves the question, well, what kind of a movement can we build that's big enough to cope with governments, rogue governments? I think the United States is a rogue government. What kind of a movement can we create that's big enough to deal with the mega corporations and the big money people? And so where I'm going with this line of thought is that I think we're going to have to think bigger than the United States and bigger than just local, state, national, because the global issues are too big. So some of us have been working on the likes of an Earth Federation. A world constitution has been drafted to replace the United Nations Charter, and it guarantees not only our individual rights, but also has embedded in it a set of environmental principles that most of you here would be very comfortable with. World law number 1 of a provisional world parliament was to outlaw weapons of mass destruction and make it that anybody worked on weapons of mass destruction became a criminal. Cindy's familiar with this. She spoke at one of my organization's meetings in San Francisco, the Democratic World Federalists. And as I listen to you talk tonight and I hear the frustration with you, with the people here, all good people, all with their hearts in the right place, I think very soon now we're going to have to start thinking bigger.
Well, I think, like I said, I do think we have to definitely think globally, and we have to work with grassroots movements in other nations. And I made a joke at your event, remember? They're talking about a federation, and you know there's a federation in Star Trek? They call it the Federation. Like they stopped having wars with each other on Earth, but then they just started having wars with other planets. So, you know, there's not just, we need to think globally, and we need to, but unless there's a paradigm shift of killing in the robber class wars, there has to be a paradigm shift, because face it, we're a warlike society globally. So there has to be this total shift from using war as foreign policy, but that's not going to happen in the robber class. They're not going to come to that decision. So that's why we have to make the decisions in our robbed class that we're not going to participate in their wars anymore.
May I please speak? Cindy, we have
Can he speak? This is a group thing.
Cindy,
yes, a few minutes. We have a few minutes left.
Cindy, we have to force Congress to cease fire. It would help a great deal if you and everybody who's interested in this subject would refer to unconstitutional wars, not just wars. Now, every local city council, as I said, is under oath and contract to prevent unconstitutional wars. They're all having problems paying their bills, Cindy. You talk about the robber class, that's great, because the United States has robbed the state of California
Yeah.
$84 billion, dear
Absolutely.
lady. Okay.
And it's not just about money, it's about our human resources
Well,
too.
okay, yes, ma'am. But
But
I mean, for
you-
some reason, people think because the murder's overseas, people really aren't too affected by it here.
And I think that you're going to just tell me what you already told me. And my question to you is, yes, our city councils, our state government, our federal government, they all swear oaths of allegiance.
That's right.
But how do you force
Okay.
them to do it?
Here we are. I've got a lawsuit right here. I'm going to give you a copy of this. It'll give you some information. And this lady and I have forced the city of Santa Rosa to say in chamber that the United States is squandering our money.
And that's cool. And San Francisco Board of Supervisors has said that too. But they're not the ones that are going to bring our troops home.
Excuse me. All it takes is one local legislative body to hold Congress accountable for mass murder. That's all it takes is one.
And then Congress is going to go to prison, or they're going to...
This lawsuit explains how 17 members of Congress from California, plus Dianne Feinstein, plus Vice President Mr. Biden, gave aid and comfort to domestic enemies in October 2002.
And they absolutely
by
did.
authorizing the use of force.
They absolutely did.
And under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, they are disqualified from holding any office.
But they still are.
That's correct. But a judge who's under oath is being forced by this lawsuit to disqualify them. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I'm for anything, and I'm for, like I said, everything's meaningful. And I'm for trying everything that we can. I don't want to discourage anybody from activism because we all need to be active. We can't give up, but we also have to join in these communities. So thank you.
Thank you very much for the 40 to 50 brave souls here tonight. It's a good start. We have to relook at our peace movement and where we're going, and we certainly thank Cindy for being here tonight. Thank you very much.